Do you believe in ghosts?
Do I believe in ghosts? Well, I've never met one in person.
And do you believe in ghosts?
I am on the fence. I am an open-minded skeptic.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I do.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I don't know.
I believe in ghosts because I've actually encountered them. The nice thing about the Deane house is you've got a lot of different spirits from different eras.
I know that house intimately, and I love that house.
Deane House today, I mean, the restaurant part is an elevated dining experience. Deane House is known not only for its venue and its grounds. You know, a lot of people do come because it's a historic building, but we also offer great food. Our concept of Deane House is local, sustainable agriculture.
It's a beautiful building, and there's lots of people using it now, laughing. And what more can I say about that? It's on the confluence of the two rivers right there, the Bow and the Elbow. It's still a beautiful building.
We use menu items that have been sourced from local farms and butchered here in-house and really cared for. With a full elevated dining experience, including wine pairings, cocktail pairings that will accompany and accentuate the meal that they're having.
I would be darned upset if it was a crummy restaurant, but it isn't. It's a wonderful restaurant with wonderful food, still classy.
What you will find is first course will usually be some sort of salad item. Second course could include a seafood. Third course usually fish. Fourth course usually meat, and then fifth course dessert. We've wanted to elevate the experience to make it elevated, fine, very elegant. They come at 12:30, but that's a guest suite. They actually don't sit down till 1. Okay. I've now worked for Deane House for a year and a half. The most interesting part of it is the continuous learning of the history. One of the nicest parts about working in the house is, you know, people are coming in all the time for dinner or events, and it's so often that we'll have somebody who's lived in Calgary all or most of their life who has some sort of connection to the Deane House because it has been here so long and it has been used for so many things.
That house was built in 1906 as the house of the superintendent of the fort at that time, Superintendent Deane.
He rode into town and his wife looked at the condition of the fort, and it was the condition of the fort was not great. It was, a lot of men were cold and freezing, there was a lot of disease, and the story goes that she looked at the fort and said, "I'm not living there," and they said, "Okay, well, we'll build you a house." So they built her this beautiful house, the Deane House. Sadly, she dies before she can even move in.
1914, a railway took over that land, and so they basically razed the entire site.
The Grand Trunk Railway comes in. The Northwest Mounted Police no longer needed that location for the fort, so they kind of pack up and the Grand Trunk Railway comes in.
When this was a rail site, it was used as a station master's house, but eventually people started living in it up until 1929, when the new owners of the land had actually said that they needed to move the Deane House.
They moved the house across the Elbow River, basically on like rollers via a tractor, and it was quite an engineering feat to move a house across a river in that time frame, and then it's been there ever since.
The Popular Mechanics magazine from the United States came up to Calgary to photograph this event because this was quite a big deal to move a house like that across the river.
For Calgary, and the Deane House consecutively were built on this part of land because they were the RCMP, and back then the RCMP had a lot to do with the Indigenous tribes of Canada. And this was a very sacred land for the Indigenous tribe because it's the confluence of the two rivers, the Elbow River and the Bow River. So for the Indigenous people of Canada, this was a very important area because of trapping, fishing, hunting, all of that was very much popular around here. So this part of the land was sort of considered sacred. These two huts outside used to be used by some of the Indigenous people to clean traps, prepare their furs and stuff before continuing on further down the river.
Stuart, you can bring that other picture out, honey. We're all dressed up, looking prim and proper. See how happy I am? I was involved with the Deane House because I'm a member of a women's organization called the Junior League of Calgary. And at one point, we decided that some of our members were very interested in the heritage of our city and seeing it disappear because we don't have a lot of old stuff. And so we put $50,000 out and started projects in 1980 on heritage restoration and heritage protection and conservation. A bunch of us got into the restoration project of the Deane House. It was kind of a mess because it had been used as a boarding house, kind of a seedy boarding house from what we understood in the research that we did. And it was interesting. It was interesting to watch them do the renovation because they're taking down plaster walls. None of us had seen a plaster wall in any of our homes. Our homes were not as old. No, it was interesting watching the work and how careful we had to be. Like even taking down, like I say, we were in there guarding doorknobs, and I actually got one as a gift. So, which is kind of fun. But I used to feel guilty looking at it that it shouldn't be here. It should be on a doorknob at the Deane House.
We try to do as much antique as we can. We have a lot of antique plates. We have a lot of antique glassware. So we try to keep, not all of it. Of course, we have a lot of very modern things as well, but anytime we could influx antique items, we do. And then we've also named a lot of our rooms to correspond to what their names probably were back in the day. So we have a pantry, we have a dining room, we have the garden room, we have the veranda, which once upon it's now completely enclosed, but when the house was originally built, the whole veranda was an outside veranda. We also have our library, which is more of a private space, but if you have the good fortune of eating in the library, it has a lot of antiques, pictures of Captain Deane, pictures of Queen Victoria, books and magazines that were around during that time. It's all still here in the house. But of course, we have all of the modern conveniences of a fine dining restaurant.
The Deane House has such an interesting history is just because of the kind of things that were going on in the neighborhoods surrounding it at the time. The East Village and Inglewood have not necessarily always been the safest neighborhoods. There was definitely a lot of crime that persisted in these areas.
Inglewood really is Calgary's oldest community. It really dates from when Calgary was founded and then when we became a town later and then ultimately a city. But obviously it was very much a working class neighborhood. Lots of people who worked for the Canadian Pacific, Canadian National, the stockyards. That's really where they lived. You had some of Calgary's most prominent citizens like Colonel MacLeod and A.E. Cross who all lived in Inglewood as well. You had the Cross residence where Rouge Restaurant is now, which was kind of like an estate style home, and then the Colonel Walker House where the Inglewood Bird Sanctuary is now. That was part of the Colonel Walker homestead. So Inglewood has definitely gone through transitions over the years. It's definitely a more rougher part of town, and then as kind of the whole idea of inner city living became more and more trendy, you had lots of different groups coming through there, right? You had the train yards over in Ramsey, you had the stockyards, you had a mix of people, and whenever you have mixes of people, sometimes bad things happen.
Once the Deane house moved across the river to its current site, it definitely had a little bit of a kind of spicier history, I'd say. There was a drive-by shooting that resulted in a murder on the front porch.
1971, probably the most remarkable thing.
There's been a double murder-suicide in the house.
Where you've got a really strong energy is the Umpervilles. Irma and Roderick Umperville. Moved into the home with their 2 daughters. We do know that Roderick did have a tendency to, I think, domestic violence. One night, he takes a butcher knife and he murders Irma in the home, and then he turns the knife on himself. I have seen Irma in the Deane house. She is what I call a trapped soul. Her energy was so strong and so horrific that her energy is there. I've actually seen her go screaming by me.
We have a little boy. He had epilepsy, and here in Calgary, we were not the best people for that. His parents lived over in the house, and unfortunately, he had to go to school and be bullied every day. And so finally he felt that his only recourse was that he hung himself from the balcony of the second floor landing. Now, lots of times when you go up the stairs, you'll feel like you're being pushed.
I'm a psychic medium, so I see ghosts, I hear ghosts, I feel ghosts, I can even smell energy. And really it comes down to Albert Einstein and his theory of thermodynamics, which states basically in a crude way that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, so where does it go? So what is a ghost? A ghost to me is energy. We're all energy, everything is energy. And so our human bodies are the vessel, our spirit or our soul is inside, and when we pass over, our soul leaves our physical bodies and goes off to another realm. Some of us go and we find a new vessel to experience the earthly world again. And some of us, unfortunately, get trapped, and that's when you have people reporting ghostly activity. When a ghost pushes somebody, it happens. I wouldn't say that we can necessarily know exactly which spirit is doing the pushing, but I would believe that if you've got a spirit who's kind of cranky and doesn't like people coming up and down stairs, and they feel like that the person who's alive is interfering in their space, so to speak, I could see them saying, "Get out of my way," and you get a push. is a huge urban legend about the Deane house that on the 3rd floor is a mysterious blood stain. I've talked to different people who have said that they've witnessed this stain, that they would clean it up and then it would reappear. This big construction guy was standing there almost frozen, and down between his legs on the stair it looked like a blood stain. And he said the strange thing is that when he had come up about a half an hour prior, there was nothing on the stairs. This construction worker was so freaked out, he was frozen, he kind of made this weird noise, turned around and ran down the stairs. Never came back to finish what he was working on.
It's always the women's bathroom. I don't know why, whether they're upstairs or downstairs on all our tours, there's always a women's bathroom that's haunted. And the Deane house is no different. If you go up, there's a little twin seat, and if you go to sit down, before you sit down, the seat will go down. And people have tried to sit down and they haven't been able to. It's just like, oh, it's so uncomfortable, like there's something pushing them before they even get into that seat. And then later on, that seat will pop up, somebody else will come in, and it'll just dip.
In the 1920s, there were 2 gentlemen that were living in Inglewood but would often hop the train because the train would take them down into downtown Calgary. And this one guy slipped. His left leg below the knee had been severed and his left hand had also been severed, and he bled out on the way to the Holy Cross Hospital.
There's one reported apparition who will walk down the stairs, and it'll appear as if he's walking, but he actually has no legs below his knees.
He didn't die in the Deane house, what I believe, because underneath the Deane house, I believe there's a vortex. It's like having a big light on. And when you're a spirit, you're attracted to that so-called light. And so this gentleman that died by the train, I believe that he saw that there was energy in the Deane house and he went there.
As we came into the garden, this young girl goes, oh, what about the woman upstairs? And I'm like, oh, we'll get to her in a minute. And then the next person goes, no, what about the woman in white in the upstairs window? And I'm like, no, we'll get to that. And so the 3rd guy comes in and goes, no, what about the woman in the window upstairs now?
People say they often see faces and stuff in the windows. But in my opinion, there's always another explanation. I mean, we have staff in here all the time. Cleaners come in the middle of the night, so what might be just, one of our cleaners scrubbing the floor upstairs in the attic might look to somebody outside like there's a ghost in the window suffering.
I would say it's good to be skeptical because there's a lot of things that can be explained logically that are of the physical world. But I will tell you, knowing what I know, if you keep an open mind and you want to open yourself to believing, amazing things can happen.
You have to open your mind. And I have no idea what that means, I really, okay, I'm going to open my mind, and things haven't changed a bit, but that's one of those answers that is just, undoable. I mean, you can't do that without. What does it mean?
I think people, once they have a preconceived notion of something, they will allow their mind to connect the dots to make it look like it is what they think it is. And then there are other people like myself who try to deconnect the dots. What's another explanation for this? I
believe that we all have energy. I believe that none of us we're all like snowflakes in the sense that no two people on this planet are alike, and we're very unique. I think that what happens to us after death is individual. If you were murdered and the energy of your murder was so intense, sometimes you'll have a spirit that'll just continue to what I call a loop. So their energy will just continuously loop in that moment right during their death, and it just gets stuck. It's such an intense energy. And then you've got people that I do believe they die. Your spirit goes off into let's call it the spirit world. Some spirits will elevate to an even higher level and will take on almost a role of spiritual advisor or a spirit guide. And then you have some people who their spirits will immediately reincarnate. They will evaluate basically what's going on down on Earth, and they'll look for a new earthly physical body to inhabit, and so their spirit will go down into that spirit and be born as a newborn.
Perfect.
Okay, my name is David Aveline. I'm a PhD in sociology. I have been at Mount Royal University for 21 years now. Somewhere about 6-7 years ago, I stopped doing research on sexuality and started doing research on the paranormal. You know, 58% of Americans believe in ghosts. Something like 28-30% of Canadians believe in ghosts. 1 out of 4 Americans believes that they've been in the presence of a ghost. You know, so it's very popular. Millions and millions and millions of people believe they've seen ghosts, and I cannot accept it by virtue of, you know, there's no empirical evidence. I mean, that's my training. One thing, you know, I mean, people told me there's 4 reasons why ghosts would stay on Earth. And, you know, one is like they don't know they're dead. The other one is that they refuse to pass through because they've got unfinished business. And, you know, my question in my mind was, well, how in the heck do you know this? Not 5 reasons, not 3 reasons, but 4 reasons. And when you say there's energy around, you know, I mean, there's no empirical proof of that, but it's, you know, it's what people think and what sounds look good to them, what sounds logic to them. At one point, I said, okay, I'm going to have an open mind. So I was walking around in a city and I came across this old hospital, over 100 years old. And I looked up at it. There's like 100 windows, all darkened. And I thought, okay, appear. Damn it, appear. Appear. And I took one window and I stared at it unblinkingly for 5 minutes and nothing came.
I would love to, as much as it would terrify me, I would love to see a full apparition of a ghost. You know, like that would be, as terrifying as it would be so exciting and so, you know, eye-opening. So I'm willing to believe that it can happen, but having worked in the house for as long as I have, I don't think there is anything paranormal or scary about the house, especially not in a malevolent way.
We spent a lot of time in this building through its restoration, and then after it finished, when all the programming was starting and whatnot. And I never felt that there might be an aura of wonderfulness in the house, but I never ever felt, none of us were ever scared of ghosts per se. And quite frankly, we were always waiting and looking and hoping something interesting would happen. And even things like, all through the renovation, there were a couple of little cats who decided to move into the building, and one of them happened to be black. So of course you start connecting all of those things and thinking, well, isn't this great? But nothing happened there that spooked anybody, or it just fed the drama of it.
We're absolutely moving away from the idea that the Deane house is haunted. When I first started, I would say it was more 60 who were interested in paranormal and 40 looking for fine dining. But today, I'd say it's probably about 75 or 80% who are more about our food and our mission about sustainability, you know, only focusing on local ingredients, and less about the whole paranormal. We still get calls, but those are becoming less and less, and more about, you know, what's on the 5-course tasting menu? Which winemaker suppers do you have coming up in the next few months? Those are more of the questions we get now.
I hope there's enough care for the house that it lasts a whole bunch, another 100 years, because it brings attention to how people lived then. I mean, and I mean, like I say, it is a wonderful place to go to visit, learn a little bit of history, and have a really good meal.